So, good evening everyone. So, I am the next reporter. But before we proceed, let me introduce myself first. I am Rizami Mata, the reporters for today's topic. So, Behaviorist Perspective, Behaviorism by Pavlov, Thorndike, Watson, and Skinner. But before we go to the main parts, let's just know first our learning objectives. The first one, explain the basic principles of behaviorism. The second one is make a simple plan of applying primary laws of learning. And the last one is determine on how to use rewards in the learning process with more efficiency. So, what is behaviorist perspective? The behaviorist perspective is a theory of psychology that states that human behaviors are learned, not innate. The behaviorist approach asserts that human beings have no free will and that all actions, characteristics, and personality traits are the result of a person, environment, and cultural forces that shape it. So when we say behaviorist perspective guys, kanang about the behaviors na ato ma-learn, either ma-learn nato through environment or even by observing only. So next slide, so ang kanang behaviorist perspective guys is have a two categories. We have behaviorism and neo-behaviorism. And then next slide, so ang nakapaloob sa behaviorism is this three. The first one is classical conditioning by Ivan Pavlov, and the second one is connectionism by Edward Thorndike, and the last one is operant conditioning by Skinner. So the next slide. So what is behaviorism? Behaviorism is the theory that gives emphasis that a behavior is mostly learned through conditioning and reinforcement. So when we say behaviorism guys, ato ang behavior is ma-learn through conditioning and reinforcement, pwede man nato ma-learn through punishment or getting our rewards. I will tackle that later. So next. So Ivan Petrovich Pavlov was Russian physiologist who studied the behavior of dogs. So kini si Ivan Pavlov guys is siya ang nag-experiment or nag-study sa behavior sa dog na ato ang tawagon na classical conditioning by Ivan Pavlov. Also known as Pavlovian conditioning is learning through association and was discovered by Pavlov as a Russian physiologist. So, naa kani example guys, let me show you in the next slide. So, Ivan Pavlov classical conditioning. So, di ba naatay 4 picture guys? No? So, in the first one, as you can see, before conditioning pa siya. And then, ang response ng dog is salivation. Salivation. Nga galaway ang dog. No, so ang food ani na part guys is gitawag na unconditioned stimulus. While ang response sa dog, we call that unconditioned response. Proceed ta second picture. Before conditioning ra gihapon siya. But different na ilahang stimuli or kanang sources. But whistle ani guys is gitawag na siya na neutral stimulus because in this part has no response ang dog. We called no condition response ang behavior na gipakita sa dog because this part, ang dog had no idea what is the main of the whistle. Wala pa siya learning in these pictures. When we proceed to the third one, during conditioning, so ato ang i-combine ang whistle plus food. So, ang response ng dog is salivation. So, galaway ang dog. So, this part, nakalearn na ang dog na if naay food means pakanon siya or either mag-whistle na means gitawag siya na and then ga-expect na naay food o pakanon siya. So, na-learn na naman sang dog ang cycle. So, diri na part sa during conditioning, na-learn na niya ang cycle. So, the last picture, di ba? Sa second picture, wala siya ga-response sa whistle. Sa last part, after conditioning, ni-response na siya. Because, naka-learn na siya na if may whistle na ay foods, That's why ang whistle is condition na siya same as the dog. Dili na siya neutral stimulus ang whistle, but take note ang kuan unconditioned response o conditioned response unconditioned response o conditioned response is same ra siya og behavior salivation, but ang nagmatter lang is lahi ilang stimulus. Sa unconditioned response ang iyahang stimulus is food, while sa conditioned response is vessel, lahi ang sources but same ang response na ilahang gipakita. Next we have Edward Thorndike was one of the first researchers to explore an attempt to outline the laws of learning voluntary responses, the connectionism theory. So, Edward Thorndike naman guys is ang iyaha is connectionism theory. So, Edward Thorndike connectionism theory have three primary law that we called law of effect, law of exercise, and law of readiness. The meaning of law of effect is that rewarding behavior leads to the repetition of that behavior, while law of exercise is continued practice is considered necessary for retention of what is learned. And then, the last one is law of readiness is that individuals learn when they physically, mentally, and emotionally ready. So, guys, note mo sa law of effect, law of exercise, and law of readiness. Kaya naa ka example ani after this slide. So, Edward Thorndike, connectionism theory. As you can see, the cat are inside a cage, guys. So, na-take note ba ninyo ato ang law of effect, law of exercise, and law of readiness? So, kanina situation ang cat, first one. So, first one sa law of effect, anay ta. Ang law of effect ani na situation is kanang every time kuno na kuan i-open ang cage, ang mind sang cat is I get to eat the yummy fish. So pakanon na siya, so I'm gonna repeat it often. Is kanang iyahang kuan instinct is kanang cycle siya always, or pwede mabalik-balik na panghitabo na if i-open ang cage, mukaon na siya in ana. So, i-apply na po na to ang law of exercise sa same situations. Ari na part is nag-start na og observe ang cat. Iyahang na-notice na more i-repeat opening ang cage, more easily and quickly ma-open daw niya next time mag-observe, or nag-observe na ang cat aron next time makabalo na siya how to open it. And then, how if ma-open na niya, makakaon na siya. So, ari na ta sa third and the last part of law of readiness. Sa law of readiness na ta. So, ari na part, ang naa sa huna-huna sang cat is, I must learn to get out because I'm hungry. Valid reason niya is, gigutom na kaayo siya, maong gusto siya maka-learn na maka-get out sa cage. So, mao na ang connectionism theory ni Edward na gi-apply ang three law of learning, the law of effect, the law of exercise, and the law of readiness. We have the next slide. Boros Frederick Skinner. 1948, Skinner studied operant conditioning by conducting experiment using animal which he placed in a Skinner box, which was similar to Thorndike's puzzle box. So, si Skinner naman guys is ang iyahang gistudyan is operant conditioning. So, ari na dinhi atong, so next slide. Operant conditioning by Skinner. Specific consequences are associated with a voluntary behavior, rewards introduced to increase behavior or punishment introduced to decrease a behavior. So, ari na dinhi ato ang negative and positive reinforcement and punishment daw. And then, si Skinner is nag-identify siya sa three types of responses. The first one is the neutral operant, and the second is reinforcers, and the last one is the punishers. So I will discuss that later in the next slide. So, as you can see guys, take a look at first, because in the next slide, I will give some example related to this format. So, we have the positive punishment, positive reinforcement, negative punishment. So take a look at first before I go to the next slide. So next slide. Boros Frederick Skinner operant conditioning. So operant conditioning by Skinner, pwede siya maka-increase or maka-decrease sa behavior. Like example in the picture, the dog pop on the carpet. Pwede kita ka-provide sang reinforcement if the dog do it again or punishment sa dog para mo stop siya. But guys, remember, reinforcement and punishment can either be negative or positive. Siya like ani. So, naatay 4 ways para ma-teach ang dog og lesson. So, we have 4 options in the table as you can see. So, if the reinforcement guys is positive in first picture, mo add taog something pleasant like cookies for the dog para mo increase ang livelihood sa behavior of dog. While in second picture, if the reinforcement is negative, we still want the desired behavior. This time naman, by removing something like pleasant, kanang alison ang dog leash. In other picture naman, if the punishment is positive, we add some unpleasant response like bunalan ang dog para mo decrease ang behavior. At last one, if the punishment is negative, we want to decrease behavior gihapon by removing something unpleasant like kanang carpet baron ang tawag ani. So, ang tawag ani nag cycle guys, all and all is that extinctions. But this conditioning is with what we called is operant conditioning by Skinner DI. So, we have the next slide is that John B. Watson was the first American psychologist to work with Pavlov idea. He too was initially involved in animal studies. So si Watson guys is nag-work ni sila together ni Pavlov. Involved pud siya sa animal studies si Watson. So in the next slide, so nag-work ini sila together ni Pavlov guys. Si Watson about studying the behavior of the dog. Sila na duwa ang nag-study about ato. In the next slide, we have neo-behaviorism. So, dan naman ta sa behaviorism og ang nakapaloob sa iyaha, aron na pud ta sa neo-behaviorism ang nakapaloob naman sa ani niya. Is these two categories. The first one is purposive behaviorism by Edward Tolmans, and the second one is social theory learning by Albert Bandurras. So, we will proceed to the next slide. What is neo-behaviorism? So, bridges the gap between behaviorism and cognitivism. New theories came into view which maintain some of the behaviorist concept. So, kung ang behaviorism guys is maklaro na ang behavior na gipakita, sa neo-behaviorism naman is murag kuan cannot be determined ang behavior na gipakita sa ani na part. Murag maglisod ka og unsa ang behavior na gipakita sang human or an animals kay sa behaviorism is ma-detect raman nato kung unsang behavior ang gipakita or gi-response. So the next slide, we have Edward Tolmans, American psychologist known for behavioral psychology, cognitive map latent learning purposive behavior. He was the professor of psychology at University of California. So si Tolmans naman guys is ang iyahang gistudihan is about purposive behaviorism related na pod ani ang cognitive map. So so let's proceed. So Tolman-Smith. So this is the example of the map of Tolman-Smith guys. So Tolman-Smith, you will find that there are, of course, at the starting point, classmates, the rat will be placed and the rat will go on, and they find the feedback, of course, will be the reward, and the rat will receive upon going to the area or in the correct area. So mauni ang na-experience sa rats nya. This means guys is we will be called a cognitive maps. by Tolman's Edward. While in the next slide, Tolman's purposive behaviorism. So, as you can see, murag same ra gihapon sa first picture. But naa na ang rats inside, di ba? So in this picture we have another experiment. Then we will find groups of rats run in the random maze, but same location, guys says. Then there are in experiments of Tolman's maze, we will find that he made two control groups, diba? The rat is placed in the maze, where in the other hand, wherein the food is placed is in the same location. Then another group which is it is also placed in a maze, but the food is placed in some different location. In this experiment, guys, the purpose ani guys is of course to find the easy na kanang route or kanang agianan na or way to find kanang foods nya. It is also serve as a goal to satisfy the stomach of the rat according to this experiment. The findings by Tolman's, guys, is the food in same location is better than the other group. Maunang findings ni Tolman's. And then we have the another slide. Nibalik na nun ko. So, Edward Tolman's purposive behaviorism key points. The first one is learning is always purposive and goal-directed. And the other one is cognitive maps in rats like Tolman's maze. Ito ganiha ang gipakita is also be called that cognitive maps in rats. So, we have also latent learning. Latent learning, we can give some example in classroom. So it tells guys some nakuan learning sa students is cannot directly appear sa uban. Ang uban nila is mo appear na near future, maybe a year if the circumstances will on the way they will realize from the past or from the learning. And then we have concept of intervening variables, and the last one is reinforcement not essential for learning. And then we have the next slide, Albert Bandoras. So, Albert Bandoras is emphasize the importance of observing, modeling, and imitating the behaviors, attitudes, and emotional reaction of others. Social learning theory considers how both environmental and cognitive factors interact to influence human learning and behavior. Well, kani naman si kuan guys, si Albert Bandoras is ang iyahang gi-studyan is all about social learning theory. So, in the next slide, we have the example. So, what is social learning theory? So, during the first half of the 20th century, the behavioral school of psychology became a dominant force. The behaviorist proposed that all learning was a result of direct experience with the environment through the processes of association and reinforcement. So, social learning theory means that we can learn through observation or through kanang makakita lang ka, maka-observe lang ka, or i-copy-paste nimo ang imuhang nakita na actions sa usa ka organization or sa usa ka events. So, ana siya guys. So, next slide, we have Albert Bandora's social learning theory is that what to know about social learning theory. So, the first one is people can learn through observation, and the second one is mental states are important to learning. And the third one is learning does not necessarily lead to behavior change. So, social learning theory by Albert Bandoras is, so ingon pa ni Bandoras guys, is ang behavior pwede ma-learn through pakikipag-ugnayan or pag-observe sa uban na taho. Then, ayon pod sa iyaha, matuto pod ang taho sa pamamagitan na og panunood sa uban or pag-observe sa uban, and then gayahon ang pagkilos or i-copy paste na ilahang na-observe. Maato iya gisuportahan sa iyahang theory na kanang iyahang sikat na Bubudal experiment. So, next slide. So Bandora's 4 elements of social learning theory, the first one is attention, the second one is retention, and the third one is reproduction, and the last one is motivation. So based on the Bobodal experiment na giingon nako last ganiha ni kuan sikat na experiment na Bobodal ni Albert Bandoras is giingon na iyahang natuklasan ni Bandoras guys na sa iyahang Bobodal experiment is makahelp siya sa mga bata. So we have the 4 conditions, right, of learning, of social learning theory. The first one is attention, retention, reproduction, and the last one is motivation. So when we apply the Bobodal experiment in that situation, and then sa attention ana niya based on the experiment and experience of Bandoras. So attention guys is kay kanang once na ang bata makata or may ma-learn sa organismo sa usa ka event or situations, iyang makita og ang mga attitude na gipakita is maura pod ang mag-treasure or mag-remain sa iyang mind. And then when we say retention is kay kanang maalala ka ng ugali na nakita nila even animals or humans, if di maalala ang pag-uugaling ilahang na-observe, if di na nila madumduman or makuan, murag malimot na sila ato, is mababa ang chance o opportunity na ma-copy paste pa nila to kay nalimot naman sila. So the reproduction, while the reproduction is different also, kanina man na pag-uugali is related sa kuan physical na kakayahan na matag-isa or matag-usa na kopyahon or i-copy paste or kanang i-copy paste ang iyahang naobserbahan sa kanang panghitabo, murag ihang gayahon even that kind of attitudes are bad, but na-observe man niya, that's why iyahang i-copy paste, murag gayahon niya ang iyang nakita sa palibot inana. Well, the last one is motivations. So kani ang pinaka-importante na aspeto sa kuan social learning theory, ingon pa ni Bandoras, the motivations. Either humans or animals is naa sila own way na kanang dili nila gayahon or i-copy ang action na ilahang makita sa uban, naa sila own way to act in a good way also. Kumbaga dili sila dali mo copy paste, murag naa sila own way na mo act or mo response without copying others, because they think that if kadto siya is bad na attitudes na gipakita, murag dili nila to i-copy paste, murag ilahang murag na sila learning na unsa ang bad o unsa ang good. That's why naa sila own way to act na dili sila mo copy paste, or ang act nila is good in a good way also. That's why what we called motivations. And the last one, and the next slide, mao lang di ay to guys. So thank you for listening. Again, if you have any questions, if nalibugan mo, just message me, and then I can explain that for all of you. Thank you.